Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Before I get too deep into this video, I just want to remind you to go subscribe to my podcasts, Web Dev 101 and Data Nation. They're two podcasts. Web Dev 101 more focused on web developer type content and just general development, while Data Nation is more specifically geared towards like data analyst, data science, data engineering. So go subscribe to those podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. Like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and yeah, what I want to do today is talk about how to use Node.js to do things other than make websites, okay, or web applications, backend or front end. That's usually what we think when we think JavaScript and Node.js. But Node.js or Deno are full-blown scripting languages, which means you could literally build all sorts of really cool utilities and tools. A lot of the tools that we use for development are made in Node.js, okay? And especially for like really simple tools, things that aren't like huge elaborate tasks, okay? As you start getting into more and more intense tasks, then you may want to build tools in Rust or Go, more likely Rust. That's why you see things like all these like new next-gen working with Node framework tools being built in Rust, because for really, really high speeds where you're doing really like huge websites, you're probably going to be better off with something like Rust that's going to run a little bit faster. But what I did here is I just created a little, just couple scripts for me to generate CSV files. So let me just walk through that. So let's see, generator, random data generator, because basically at work we needed some fake data or just some data. And so what I was able to do is create some fake data sets. And now I have this repo, and anytime I need a fake data set, I can just generate it with this. Okay, and essentially just to kind of go over what libraries I use, just took 3 libraries, Faker. Now, if you're not familiar with Faker, the original Faker repo got shut down a few months ago. Let me actually show you this, because this is a fun story. So what happened is that the original creator of Faker, which is like one of the most popular libraries around, is used to generate just fake data, like if you need a fake name, a random price, whatever. Okay, so it was made, and then recently the creator just basically shut it down. I'm not going to get into who Aaron Schwartz is and the history behind there, but bottom line is what happened is it was over some frustration about the community not supporting him providing this thing open source for free. So it's like, hey, if people aren't willing to give to me, let's botch it. So that broke a lot of people's code. Okay, although I do encourage you to support open source when you can. Okay, like I'm a monthly contributor to the Scala Play framework because they are, like people who are still maintaining it. They to allocate the time, they need financial help, and I think I've grown more fond of the Scala language, and I want to start doing some web work with Scala 3, so I contribute monthly to the Scala Play framework. Okay, and probably will start making more contributions to other open source projects that I really appreciate. But yeah, but basically what's happened is that now people are moving over to this library. This is like the open source fork. Let me go back over here. Okay, the open source fork right here. So at Faker.js, Faker. Okay, and it works great. Okay, then there's this library here, CSV writer, which just allows me to take like an array of data and write it to a CSV file. Okay, because it's generally what you're going to want when you just want sort of just like blotches of data to load into like a SQL database or something. And doing some date stuff, I use datefns, because that's generally like the big library for dates used to be Moment. The problem is like Moment uses like Moment objects. So basically what happens is that instead of just like working with the date object itself, you create these Moment objects. But the problem is when you do that is like you're actually piling up all the methods inside that object. So you're creating these giant objects for each date that you create. So it wasn't necessarily the most efficient way. They have deprecated the Moment library, even though a lot of people still use it. And I think some of the features of it have been like adapted into a library called Luxon or Luxon, Luxon. But as far as I can tell, datefns is like the new standard date library, like the library you should be using if you're working with dates. The difference is that datefns, instead of you creating this object with a bunch of methods, what you do is you have a bunch of functions in which you just pass normal JavaScript date objects to. So you still work with just the raw JavaScript date objects, but datefns provides you a lot of functions to make it easier to work with them. Okay, so those 3 libraries are the libraries I'm using. That's it. Okay. So now let's take a look at like the actual scripts. So we go to generators. So like what I do is I have this folder here, generators, which is where the different scripts for different files I want to create are, and then out is where like the output gets put. Okay, now in this generators folder, let's say I go to customers. Okay, basically I start out, I load my dependencies, so I'm bringing in Faker and the CSV writer. Okay, for this one I didn't need data-fns, so actually let me go to the one where I didn't need data-fns, which is sales. So I bring in the format function from data-fns, because what you do is you import like one function at a time. And the reason why some libraries do that, like newer versions of like not underscore is kind of the same deal, but the other one is Lodash, because then different bundlers can then tree shake and make like the final bundle more efficient. Tree shaking means just like only take the code from the library that you need and don't bundle the rest. So bundlers like Rollup and stuff like that really make good use of that ability to do that. Okay, so format is just for me to like take a data object and turn it into like a string of a particular format. Faker generates fake data again, and then CSV writer is going to write the CSV. So the first thing we do is we set up the CSV writer object. So I create a CSV writer object, and then I pass it like where do I want it to make the CSV file, and then I give it like the details of like sort of what the data is going to look like. So it knows, okay, hey, when I see this property in an object in the array, that property should map over to this column in the CSV file. So basically what happens when it gets the array of objects, anytime it sees like ID as the property of the object, it'll then turn it to sale ID inside the actual CSV file. Okay, so what I do is I then create an empty array. That's going to be the records. Okay, and then I created these two functions to generate some random numbers, because the idea is that this data relates to those other two CSV files, products and customers. So I want to, and I know that customers, I was generating 10,000 records, and for products, I generated 5,000 records. So I want to generate a random number within that range. So I generate some functions to do that. And then what I do is I loop, because I want to create 100,000 sales. So I say, hey, let's loop 100,000 times. That's this for loop here. And then for each loop, into that records array, I push a new object that maps over to this description over here. Okay, so you see ID, purchase date, customer ID. Now for the purchase date, we generate the date using Faker, because Faker you can generate a date. So I say, hey, make a date that's within the last year, because the number you pass to it is like, okay, from today looking back, how far back do you want to make a date? So I'm saying, hey, make a date within the last year. And then I pass it to the format function that's from data-fns to say, hey, take that object that just got created, that data object that got created, and make it a string, a date string that looks like so. Okay, and then what that means, you can look in the data-fns docs, because that's not always universal in the way that those, like what a lowercase y and what an uppercase y means and things like that. It's not necessarily as universal as I'd like. Okay, and then here I'm just using my random number functions to generate random IDs, and then product quantity, again, I'm just generating a random number there. But the idea is and then after that, we just run this function here that actually takes those records, because see, I built this. So this is just building the array of records. So then it takes the array of records, that records array, and then literally just writes all that to a CSV file and then just prints out done when it's done. Okay, so I'm not making a front-end web application. I'm not making a back-end web application. I'm literally just creating a script for me to create some CSV files, so that way I have some like fake data that I want to do. Maybe if I want to load it up into SQLite and do some SQL queries or something like that, just to kind of like demonstrate. And this is pretty useful. And I'm doing this with JavaScript, not as a web thing. It's just, and you can create scripts like, for anything. You can create a script that does like grammar checks. Okay, all you have to do is just like sit there and say, use the file input-output library of Node.js, load the text of the file, and then program all the rules to check for grammar. There probably already is a library like that already. Okay, yeah, let me just show you some of the other ones so you can kind of see like how we use Faker for some of the other stuff. So here, like, we're generating a fake address, fake last name, fake first name, city, state abbreviations, all this stuff. I'll put a link to this repo in the video description. But the point of this video is to show you that, like, and this is also doable with like Python and Ruby, that oftentimes like and you could even do this with something, you could probably do this with Bash as well. Bash being like the terminal scripting language. But bottom line is to think creatively about what you can do with the programming skills that you have. It doesn't always have to come down to creating a full-blown application that has like a graphical interface or an API. It could just be utility scripts that just help you get a little thing done that's part of some other task that you're trying to do. Okay, you can use programming to help make your life easier. And you, again, generally, pretty much all languages have some scripting element to them, so you can make tools like this. Even the compiled languages, you can compile a tool, even though you have to compile it first, that does these things. But yeah, but scripting languages are generally the best for this kind of thing because you can then customize them as you use them multiple times. Yeah, so just to kind of show you the power, and again, you can do this with Deno or Node.js. You would just have to know the differences between the two. But again, here, this is me doing it with Node, and see, it's a cool, useful little tool that I can use to do things for me in the future. And then I can create other tools, and I can go into the NPM library. Like, again, let's take a look to see, is there a grammar check? Or let's say spell check, even though I need spell check on my search. Okay. So there's some libraries here that might be proof, like a lightweight proofreader. And you could do is you could just create a script that like loads up a document you may have, loads up all the tests, runs the proofreading on it, churns out the output into maybe another file, so that way you have the original file. You know, you can get creative. Now, a couple of things I just want to make sure I mention while we're here. If you're a newer developer, I did create this resource, the new developer handbook. Okay. And what this resource does is that it's just a kind of guide to help you find the resources you need on your developer journey. So you would just read this. There's plenty of stuff like guides on how to build your brand as a developer, where to start if you're just starting, pointers to different videos, blogs, whatnot for different situations. Lots of stuff here to help you focus your journey if you're getting into development and kind of where to go and what to do. But hopefully you guys enjoy that. Again, do subscribe to my podcast, Web Dev 101 and Data Nation, both on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify. So I'll leave it at that. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.